I'm so happy that you brought up genetic testing. So let's talk about it. When a child has autism, there's likely a chance that there's going to be some kind of comorbidity. And comorbidity, you have the word co in it. So like Tiffany and company, like company means like there's something that's tagging along with the autism diagnosis. Usually it's like ADHD, which you don't get that diagnosis till later on, like maybe like 5, 7. There's ODD, there's epilepsy, there's all these different other like tag along comorbidities that kind of flow with autism. But I love that you mentioned genetic testing, because if your child has a syndrome or a genetic disorder like Williams syndrome, Down syndrome, if they were born with a genetic syndrome, then usually autism follows that. For example, like I've worked with a family where she was diagnosed with Williams syndrome and autism, which they are kind of complete polar opposites, to be honest. Williams syndrome, it's, there is no stranger danger vibe. They love everybody. They love music. They're very social. And then autism is the opposite. They're not that social. You know what I mean? Depending on the learner, but you see what I mean? And then like my other video that I just posted this morning, if you ask somebody, what does autism look like? Depending on their experience and exposure, you're probably going to hear something crazy. Because when you have a disability or a genetic disorder, usually autism follows that, like I said, but people use autism as the umbrella term as to, why they are the way that they are. So for example, like, oh, they have Down syndrome and something, and they usually get diagnosed with autism too. They're, oh yeah, well, Down syndrome, you could clearly see because of the traits that come with Down syndrome, you could tell when someone has Down syndrome because of the distinct features, and that's usually comes with a genetic disorder or like a syndrome. But what I was saying is that since somebody has autism attached to a genetic disorder, it's easy to just, oh yeah, they have autism. You see what I mean? So then everyone is pairing autism with that genetic disorder and all those comorbidities when it's not all of autism. And obviously, the more comorbidities that you have or genetic disorders, it's going to have an impact on your learner. It's going to determine whether they're severely impacted or they're not. So you could be born, and also too, I'm going to let you know too, there are doctors that will attach an autism diagnosis, because with the autism diagnosis comes treatment services that the insurance gets to pay for. So if autism is covered by law through insurance, the insurance has to pay for ABA therapy if you have an autism diagnosis. So if you have a child that has a disability or something else and you're considering autism, go get the evaluation for autism, because if you get the autism diagnosis, you're going to be promised services. And another thing too is, I was speaking with another BCBA, like say your child has ADHD. Some companies will not cover ABA therapy for ADHD because they say, oh, they don't have autism. But you can get ABA services outside of autism. They just hear like, oh, autism is covered. ABA therapy is covered with an autism diagnosis. So they automatically think like, well, you need an ABA autism diagnosis to get ABA. No, you don't need an autism diagnosis to get ABA. ABA could be treated for ADHD, any type of behavioral issues. So basically, to review everything, if your child is born, has some genetic disorder, that is going to trump autism. And then it's like autism is next. And then if your child doesn't have a genetic disorder and they do have autism, okay, well, high likely the autism is going to trump it. But then guess what? Later down the road, they might have anxiety. They may have ADHD. They may have sensory issues. You see how it's kind of like a little domino effect? And really quick too, you need to understand like autism has selective traits, right? And then Down syndrome or any kind of genetic disability is going to have its own barriers that the child's going to have to face because of the genetic disorder. You see what I mean? So when you have a very unique profile of an individual, that's why everything has to be individualized, because you have to consider the traits of every single comorbidity that they have, so that you can kind of create a whole little structure like, okay, yeah, the inflexibility is due to this. And then the low muscle tone is a genetic trait. So that's something that we have to consider all the time. You see what I mean? Depending on the diagnosis, depending on the genetic disorders, it's going to create barriers for your learner. So once we know the barriers, then we can address it and find easier ways for them to be able to complete tasks and be able to communicate their needs and make them successful in their environment.